most of my work has been concentrated on the history of the Black pioneers in Canada since 1792. You know, the first exodus to Canada through Africa, Nova Scotia, and then those in Edmonton, Amber Valley, Needstone, Manitoba, and then those what we call Black pioneers in British Columbia, 1858. Then it came down, the history of the Black pioneers in Vancouver, 1859, and the course of their migration. I mean, the major historical sites, settlement places where the Blacks settled. And I know that some people, for example, as this, the city has politicized much when they definitely created a kind of a tokenism by saying that Hogan was the first and the Black community in Vancouver. So when that's what many of the things that the Black community have been feeded, the community have learned so many things when the city completely promoted and branded the Blacks as originated from Hogan. That's not at all. The Black people were in Vancouver 49 years before Hogan even came to be known. Not even to be known, because the name Hogan was created, first it came into Vancouver history around 1914, and the Black community had already been here since 1859. And many of them that time had been already settled, created major historical sites in the West End. There are videos, a project which I'm working on right now. So far I've produced 5 videos sponsored by the provincial government and the Vancouver School Board. So, and there's also a curriculum which I myself and Professor Larry Davis, we created on behalf of the provincial government and the British Columbian school boards. So they are using that curriculum. But now it's still needed to be the major objective that all school boards can be using that curriculum, because there was completely nothing about the Black history. And I'm happy now that the curriculum is being used by a lot of different schools here.
Let's talk about, you were saying that Black people were here before Hogan's Alley. What do you think made Hogan's Alley like the center, or like more popularized than any other settlement that
when you look at the history of Canada, Black people in Canada, anyway, when you look at Hogan's Alley, the terminology, the term Hogan's Alley is not entirely related to anything associated with being Black in Vancouver. That's what we really want people to understand, especially the Black intellectuals. Hogan's Alley does not associated with anything for being a Black person or a Black identity in Canada. First of all, you need to understand what is Hogan. Who was Hogan? Who was Hogan's Alley? So Hogan's Alley, is like a metaphor, an image, someone portrayed, or it's a negative political propaganda, to portray a certain community, ghettoization, those who live in ghetto, poor, red light, prostitute, and crime area. That's the slang the American is used to describe the people who lived in those vulnerable communities, but not because of the Blacks, but because of the Irish immigrants. So Hogan's Alley is much more associated with being Irish. As you can hear the name, John Hogan, our former premier, is as you can hear, the Hogan is the Irish. The name is rooted from the Irish ghetto in Manhattan, New York. That was the 1894, 1800. And the reason why that name became so popular, it's not only Hogan is popular here in Vancouver. It's just because what you know that it is popular here. But when you go to United States, Hogan is a very popular, comic. It's a comic strip, When you talk about Hogan we mean the comic ghetto, the comic strips. And it is associated with the origins of what you call the cartoons. The cartoons in the media, the modern cartoons, contemporary cartoons you see always painted in the media. So Hogan's Alley was related to the invention or the creation of those cartoons by the man known as Robert Felton, who was American journalist, normally specialized in cartoon. And then one day he went to, in 1894, he went to United States in Manhattan, New York. I've been to New York when I was doing a research on Hogan Alley, and that place is still there. Hogan Alley is still there. The Irish ghettos, they are still there. And where the name was coined, the space is still there, So Robert F. Felton, he went to the Irish ghetto because the Irish population in the United States, they were highly hated and discriminated by the Americans for unknown reasons, So the Americans always look at the Irish as people of poor ghetto, And then Robert F. Felton, he went there one time in the winter time, and he looked at the Irish kids, which he described them several names, but the most popular one was the yellow kids. The yellow kids, and then they were black neighbors, former slaves all that time. Then he looked at the yellow kids that attracted his attention, and the following day, the headline went all over United States that the ghettos, the Irish ghetto, those who live underworld, the happy hooligans. So happy hooligans, the white folks who lives in the happy hooligans away from the upper classes of Americans. So then he said that the Hoganis, and then because it was a neighborhood that associated with that, with being ghetto, being crime, characteristics of that nature, then he described it and said an alley, the Hogan's Alley. Then the Hogan Alley debate came into effect for you to know it today. But the question what we need to know, why is it Hogan's Alley in Vancouver became so popular? So back in old days, the black community arrived in Vancouver, specifically in this neighborhood. That was 1900. As I said, that black folks were already here 48 years before that name being brought to Vancouver. But in the United States, the time when the United States government was looking for the FBI and the CIA, they were looking at a neighborhood which has characteristics of criminal, red, white, and the prostitutes, okay? And then they went to Hogan's Alley in Manhattan, New York. Then they found that the Irish neighborhood ghetto, it had actually the type of characteristics that FBI and the CIA, they were looking for. They were looking at a place where they can establish the CIA and the FBI training, tactical training on hunting criminals, shooting range, and killing criminals, tactics. So then Hogan's Alley now was transformed to become the training base for CIA and FBI criminal tactical training. So that is where right now, if you Google and you find out Hogan's Alley, you may see the old Hogan's Alley cartoons, which I was describing, but now what will pop up today is the Hogan's Alley FBI and CIA training center. So that is what now you are going to see there. But however, because of that history, the Irish were so much concerned, the growing concern of being portrayed as with such a name, that negatively impacting, psychologically impacting their community, and globally taking the image as the Irish ghetto, the cartoon, leveling the human being into the level of cartoon, criminal, red light district. So they didn't want to associate much more with that. However, they created a newspaper to carry out those memories known as the Irish Echo. So you can still definitely find it there. So, but now here in Vancouver, because of globalization, the movement of those ideas, words, racism and racial discrimination, the Vancouver Sun, one of the media journalists, he wrote that 700 Negroes live in downtown East Side, of whom we don't know nothing, you know. The Negroes were around the town, but nobody knows what they were doing. So, but in 1914, one of the historians here, they set up Vancouver. Vancouver was much more, the name was much more used by the 1914 in Vancouver, but it popularized by the Vancouver Sun. You know, when they look at the neighborhood, what the Negro were doing in Strathcona, and they say the Hogan is alley. What is there is Hogan is alley. But because of the growing concentration of Chinese were the majority at Hogan is alley down here. And even if today, when I remember when we were doing the public hearing campaign, I've been fighting the city to remove the viaduct, I think 14, 15 years. And in 2015, we brought the city to agree to remove the viaduct because it destroyed the black community. But I was much more disappointed that 2015, October 27, then October 29 in the following morning, I saw the Chinese were claiming the land which we are calling our community, Hogan is alley. So every Chinese, the Chinese family came back to reclaim their land. And I didn't see any black folk to come to say this was our land. So that was really justified that possibly they could have claimed that if that the land belongs to the black community, the city could have been returned them back. Okay, so and then the popular ghetto, the name why it's so popular in Vancouver, there were a lot of things that people don't know why Hogan is alley became so popular. You can become, in history we say we can become popular by either two things, either negative or you can be what? You can be positive. Either way you can build your name. But the black community, which is known, it is not because of Hogan. Black community were much more concentrated all over Strathcona. So the black community were all over Strathcona. And I think this library has the address where the black community lived. The address, the homes, the phone number, the contact of those people. So when you want to look at Jimi Hendrix, you won't find any address of the Jimi Hendrix family. There were a few folks there down there who lived around the neighborhood, but they were bootleggers. So, but around,
Black community now?
Hmm?
The Vancouver Black community now? You're saying that there's still Strathcona is still there, or is there dispersal? Or
yeah, there are some black folks who still who were descendants of the black community in Hogan in Strathcona. But Hogan is alley, it is just the Hogan is alley in Vancouver, like that of the United States. It was a ghetto. Okay, it was a ghetto, was a red light district, was a crime area, was a prostitute area in Vancouver from 1900. Then, because of that, different communities, different diverse communities could come and hang out down there, including the black folks from Strathcona. They could also go and hang out around Hogan is alley. But the thing is that because of its negative connotation with the city, in 1917, the city of Vancouver made an order. The Vancouver City Council, the mayor and the councillors, they made an order saying remove all undesirable. So removing undesirable, there were things that happened. Of course, as you know, there is when Nora Hendricks came to Vancouver in 1918, along with the Mrs. Weismore and others, there is up here the Pryor family right now, they're in United States, they're in Seattle. They all came together and they did a fund. They were questioning where the Negroes live in Vancouver. So the black community, especially the men, they had a hall known as the Pullman Porter's Hall. It was on down at Homer, including Nora Hendricks. She was living on Homer. So that's one of the things that the black community, where many of them lived in downtown the city center. Then they came here because majority, when they opened up officially the church, so in 1918, all of those black folks who were everywhere, that church was around the church, there is the Scotland Community Center, there was the Irish Center, there was so many, even the Irish community, they are still occupied, a lot of them around Hogan easily. They have been opening up a business, right now they're opening up new businesses around the neighborhood. So the church was a Scandinavian church, and Nora Hendricks, she arrived here when she was a younger girl with her husband. And they say, where the Negro live, what makes the chicken to cross the street? Or what makes the duck to cross the street? Let's all come together. And if we cannot have a community center, we can have a church of our own. Because the Negro was always standing behind in the church. And Nora thought that maybe they could have their own church. So the Scandinavian church along Pryor and Jackson Street, 823, I think, so 27. Then they all came, and then they went to the church. It was under sale of $1,000. And then the Nora said, we can make $500 if we can fundraise. And then the matching grant, I can go back to Cleveland in United States. She went and convinced the Marcus Garvey at the Universal Negro Improvement Association and the African Methodist Episcopal Church. So I brought back those former members of that church. They always come, and we revived the congregation because the building is owned by another person. So the church now is running about 10 years in the Japanese hall right now in Strathcona. So, and then the fundraising taken, and in 1935, the black community were celebrating, jubilating that they completed the land title and they received the land title. Until 1972, when the city of Vancouver, 1957, the Vancouver introduced what we call urban renewal by Professor Leonard Marsh and Bette Marsh from the University of British Columbia. Professor Leonard Marsh was working as a School of Social Worker, the Department of Social Worker Director, and his wife was working in the Vancouver Housing Association, which is the BC Housing today. So the Central Mortgage and Housing Corporation under Canada Housing Act 1936, the federal government of Canada introduced the urban renewal and the construction of modern housing after the war, First World War. The war returning war soldiers could be given homes. So the modern mortgage system, it was not entirely for ordinary people, it was for soldiers. So known as an agreement for life, because a soldier could work and then be given a house for free. So, but then the banks lobby that mortgage should be for everyone. And then the central mortgage, when it was created in Quebec, the main objective was to construct modern housing. So they created the fund for researching ghetto and poor communities. And then in Vancouver, Leonard Marsh's wife, Bette Marsh, already she was working in the housing industry. She proposed that there is a small community here in Strathcona, the ghetto, Hogan Isali. It needs a redevelopment. And then Leonard Marsh was working in the United States after the Second World War. He was an expert for freeway and housing. So he had already that plan, and then he came to the city of Vancouver. They employed him, they contracted him, and did a survey for all of this neighborhood. So his research was called the Strathcona Rebuilding Neighborhood, 1957-72. And that was the plan, or his recommendation. In his book, in his report, page 8, he said, there is a small colony of Negroes, even though they have money to live anywhere, there is a sense of racism. They will be discriminated. Then that report was rejected by the federal government. And in 1972, Minister of Housing, that time was called Paul Hellyer. Hellyer is Hellyer. He was from Toronto. He died last year in February, in winter time. So he came here on housing project. Then when he went to City Hall, the Chinese, Mary Chan, Terry Chan, Mary Chan and her daughter Terry, they went to protest. And they went to see the minister. The city council refused them, but the minister already recognized them. If you look at those photos, then the minister said, let us go and see them in the downtown. So they came here and they went to the Black church. So the minister was very angry when he looked at that the plan, instead of building housing, Leonard Marsh recommended to construct a freeway. So that freeway, actually, it was on the street, the next street after this building, called the East Georgia. Then the whole neighborhood, many people, blacks, had already left Strathcona. Those who owned business around Hogan, many of them ran away. And that was the end of the black community in Vancouver, leading to the end of what you see today. There's completely nothing. But the first original black community was located on Chinatown, where there is a beat lane. Is on it is Camby and Dunsmuir, 534. That was the original black community. This was all just Hogan was the last. Strathcona was the last black community.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was very informative.